Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny along with Kenny Squared. Welcome back to Sports on the Positive Tip, where we have conversations at the intersection of sports and faith. Kenny, I really have to apologize. Mark Pope, we were saying we didn't know him and we probably just don't remember him, but he was a guard on the 1996 Kentucky championship team. So that's probably how he got the job, I would think, because he's a Kentucky alumni. And I guess he's had a moderation of success. So apologies to Mark Pope.
That maybe that's why the name sounds familiar.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, probably. Because it did sound familiar to me too. All right, let me throw a stat off you, and I'll tell you why I'm saying it in a second. NHL, which we're going to talk a lot more hockey next week. But since 2013-2014 season, when the NHL implemented their wild card round, did you know that not one winner, so in the last 10 years, not one winner of the President's Trophy has gone to the Stanley Cup Finals?
Wow.
Well,
That's crazy.
it is crazy. Do you know why that's important? Because you know who
Are the
won the
Rangers the
President's
president?
Trophy? What?
Is it the Rangers that
The
won?
Rangers won the President's Trophy this year.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. We saw what happened to the Bruins last year. It was either 2 or 3 years ago. The Columbus Blue Jackets, or is it the Yellow Jackets? I'm not sure. I think it's the Blue Jackets.
No, Blue Jackets, yeah.
Blue Jackets, right? They also lost in the first round, but for Boston, it was even more huge because they had an all-time season, most wins, most points ever, and they lost in the first round when they were up 3 games to 1 over the Florida Panthers, who eventually did get to the finals last year as a eighth seed team. So we got to talk more about the Rangers next week, but we have a lot to talk about this week. You ready to get into this?
Let's go.
All right. This episode of Sports on the Positive Tip is brought to you by the Tavern Coffee House. Attention, coffee lovers. Are you craving the perfect cup of coffee to start your day? Well, look no further than the Tavern Coffee House. It's located at 12302 Buckeye Road in Cleveland, Ohio. You can also check them out and order your coffee at thetaverncoffee.com. Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny and
Kenny squared.
with the Sports on the Positive Tip podcast. That Ranger statistic is still bothering you, I could tell. That's we yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, thanks for that. Thanks for
Yeah.
that world.
I want the warm spring here. I want the 1994 spring here in New York. Except I don't want just a trip to the finals. I want 2 championships. So we got to keep our fingers crossed that 30 years later, that maybe we're hitting onto something with the Knicks and the Rangers. Knicks in the number 2 seed. Where to start? Let's start in the NBA. But let's start though with this tough story. And Kenny, you and I have been talking about this for the last 2 years at least, maybe even longer, about the gambling issue with the sports apps. And slowly, some of these guys that got suspended, Calvin Ridley, few others, you know, the NFL, and I don't want to take any sports out of it. I think they're all right now don't know actually how to handle this, except I do admire how Adam Silver, how swift he came down on Jonte Porter. So Jonte Porter, he's done for life. Why don't you pick up the story there and give us your take?
Yeah, so he got the what is he now, the 16th or something like that player banned for life from the NBA. After they did their investigation, they found out that not only was he betting on his own games, but he might have altered how he played and his performance in order to secure the under on specific parlays and things like that. And also, he was giving insider information to different bettors out there. So it's not just this dude was dumb and betting on games on himself, but he was actually what all of these sports are worried about, manipulating the game in order to make a buck. And so I think that's where we really see the biggest issue. Like, I don't know if you're if you are like a Jonte Porter, who's not a huge star by any means, he's known as being Michael Porter's brother.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but like if you are kind of that low level star making 500,000, $1 million a year, and you're gonna bet games on yourself, go for it. I feel like that's putting your money where your mouth is in a not the best way, but I understand it at least. But when you are manipulating parlays, telling insider information that's not known to the public, that's where I think the bigger issue comes in. Because you have guys that, because of load management, oh, they're only going to play 10 minutes. And yet people don't know that until the game's actually going on and they get benched. Now, obviously, in the NBA, there's a whole set of circumstances there. But take, say, in Major League Baseball, as a teammate that Pete Alonso is not playing tonight. But the Mets aren't going to say that ahead of time because he's not injured or anything like that. But like there are going to be people that bet, will Pete Alonso hit a home run? Will he get a hit? All of like the rando stuff that they can do. And so when you decide to say that out to people where it hasn't been made public, it's giving everyone else an unfair advantage. It's just looking really, really bad for the league. The NBA had to ban him for life. Because like it's not just this dude who was betting on sports thing, which is still an issue. And I think it's going to continue to be an issue when you look further down the line. However, when you're manipulating the sport, I think that's where the bigger issue lies.
Yeah. Let me ask a couple of questions. Has Porter said anything anywhere yet? Have like is he saying, "Hey, I didn't do this," or has he said anything yet? I haven't read or seen anywhere that he's made any sort of statement just yet.
I don't think so. I haven't seen anything. I mean,
Okay.
I'm not going to say that he hasn't, but I
Right.
haven't seen anything.
Okay. Now, did I also read correctly that there were times where he took himself out of games? That now they're thinking he may have faked a few illnesses a couple of times. And because something I read, I know nothing about gambling. I don't know what a parlay is, to be honest with you. um,
Keep it that way.
yeah, that's probably a good thing, right? But what I did read also, Ken, was that it wasn't that hard to track. That he made $21,000, which for you and I, oh my gosh, that's a heck of a lot of money. But even him making the minimum, that doesn't seem that much to me. But he made it through some of these parlays where he's taken himself out of games. Actually, I mean, what was the deal? Did you read that same thing?
Yeah, that was like part of the manipulation of like different, because like I'll give the 101. I'm not a bettor. I actually as an AG passer, I'm not allowed to be like a gambler.
Right.
But like I just think gambling is, in my opinion, gambling is kind of dumb. Um,
Yeah.
but like with a lot of these type of, like you can bet on basically everything. Like you hear about it in the Super Bowl where you can bet on the coin toss, how long someone's going to sing the national anthem, but you can bet on like how players perform. So you can bet on how whether someone's going to hit a home run, how many points over or under someone's going to get. From the very beginning of the season, you can bet on who's going to win the title, which like anytime you have more of like the Cinderella team, stuff like that usually pops up. But like you can bet on basically everything. So it sounds like what he was doing was betting on himself. He's going to get, because usually they set it at a half a point because there's a distinct over or under. So let's say like he's averaging 4.5 points, or he's going to score over or under 4.5 points in this game. He gets his 4, and then it's like, oh, well, I'm not really feeling that well. And
Yeah.
like, you never know. He could have never scored another point again. I mean, that happens all the time in the NBA. Look at Klay Thompson. But like intentionally doing it so that you make sure that you make that money is crazy. Also, $21,000, like you said, is a lot for you and I. But when you're looking at an NBA salary, that's like almost a paycheck, and you basically threw your entire life away, your entire NBA career away over like just an
Yeah.
extra paycheck.
Yeah.
So,
All right. I'm going to anoint you as the commissioner of all sports in a second. Right. And what would possibly be a solution? Now, this is a big deterrent, I think. To be banned for life, I think that's a big deal. And I also, this is just my opinion, right? Um, I also don't want to think that just because you're making a lot of money that there's no need for you to gamble. Because I don't think it's actually a need, right? Because when I think about some of the biggest gamblers of all time, one Michael Jordan used to gamble like crazy. I've read somewhere recently that he still does. Charles Barkley also, and I think I read somewhere where he stopped, but these are guys that made a lot of money, a lot of NBA salary back in the day, way by far the highest paid players, not by far, but they were the highest paid players. Jordan was making over 30 million a year on basketball, but probably 2 or 3 times that much on Nike. Yet he still would, bet $300,000, $400,000, on stuff. So I think it's more of a sickness. Maybe it is out of a need. So I don't think that the higher paid players are exempt, I guess is what I'm saying. Let me mention just a couple other quick things, and that is this is on the heels of the whole Shohei Ohtani thing, and you had a couple other things to say about that to me this week. I want you to touch on in a second. But also very quietly in the same article that I was reading about Jonte Porter, and I didn't know this, that the whole Temple University basketball team, which is a really good program in Philadelphia, they're all under NCAA and federal investigation for betting and throwing games and stuff like that. Now that's been really quiet, probably because there's just no evidence just yet. But I didn't realize that at all unless I saw it kind of in this blurb in this article. So I just think, and we've said this for a while, man, that sports in general, with the whole advent of the gambling apps and everything, is really headed down a bad path, especially with younger players who may come from impoverished areas. I mean, you see it firsthand every day that all of a sudden they're making money, but yet they might still have ties to a bad element of people, and I don't care how much money you're making. If someone threatens your family's life, just like they did with JB Bickerstaff, the Cleveland Cavs coach, it could be tempting to, okay, I don't want to see anything happen. These are really bad people. So how do we stop this? And you're the commissioner now of all sports, because I don't think any sport is exempt from it. Talk first about Shohei for a second, and then what would be some solutions, do you think, to kind of just curtail this some?
what did I say about Shohei? I'm trying to
Oh,
remember.
yeah, maybe it was the week before, and maybe we talked about it last week. Maybe I'm mixing it up because
Okay.
it turned out to be 16 million now, right? And
Oh yeah.
maybe it was Phil Mushnick in an article that said that he in no way he believes that someone at a bank or a broker that worked for him, somebody should have noticed it. So he's of the belief that maybe he had something to do with it. We just don't know. But what would you do now to solve this?
Um, well, to me, one of the easiest ways, but I don't think they'll ever do it, is like stop getting sponsored by all these guys. Because like basically
Big
they're like
business.
every single one. And
Yeah.
it's not just the sports themselves, it's any type of media that's connected to it. Like how many like social media posts are probably sponsored by DraftKings or
Yeah.
FanDuel or whatever the
Podcast.
other ones are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like every podcast that is sports related is
Yeah.
probably sponsored by. So I think that would be one, but also no one's going to do that because of the money that it brings in. I think continuing to have this standard is exactly what they need to do. Um, like no messing around. if even if there's a sniff of you possibly betting on anything related to our sport, you're done.
Yeah.
Now the NFL, it's more if you're betting on their property, fantasy, things like that, like automatic year suspension. But like to me, if you bet on anything related to your sport, you should be done. Because it still doesn't, to me, it doesn't matter whether you're betting on your team or not. How many times do we see guys going from team to team to team? And you're telling me you don't know someone about something that is
Of
happening
course.
at
Yeah.
another with another team?
Yeah.
Like to me, it should just be like you can't bet on it, period. Um Also like, and you had kind of touched on this a little bit. Um Gambling is an addiction, and sometimes it isn't necessarily treated as such. They say usually like at the very end or in like little fine print at the bottom that like, oh, if you have a gambling problem, make sure you talk to someone.
Right.
I think it's a great example though with Ipe and Shohei Ohtani that like even those that have serious gambling problems are really good at keeping it from people that are close to them. And I don't know, from what I understand with at least baseball, they do at least like a year, like an annual training on like what you are and aren't allowed to bet on. Usually it's like baseball and such. And it kind of seems like that's the case too, because Ipe through 19,000 different bets never bet on baseball once because he knew it was against the rules.
Right.
So I think especially as it becomes more and more prevalent in the sport, it just has to continue to be emphasized that if you do this, you are banned for life, period.
Yeah.
But I don't know. To me, it's just the easy thing of just don't get sponsored by them. But in Ohio alone, $900 million plus last year in
Yeah.
sports betting, and that was in 1 year. People
Yeah.
aren't going to just like say, well, we don't need that type of money.
Yeah. I think those are all great thoughts. It blows my mind a little bit, Ken, because betting always happened, and a lot of it was illegal, betting, but it's happened for years, and I've been alive long enough now to know how, casinos used to just be in Las Vegas and Atlantic City. They couldn't legally be in anywhere else. Now they're all over the place as well. It was very popular to put a casino on a boat before because, that's how you circumvented the law and everything. So there were a lot of casino boats and stuff like that back in the 80s and 90s. And so I don't want to kill the whole industry, right? If people want to bet, it's a free country. You can you can bet and you can do what you need to do. But I think when you're have influence on the outcome, it just should be, it should absolutely be what Adam Silver did. But here's the thing with phones, tablets, I'm not sure what's wrong with my voice, but with phones and tablets and computers and everything, I mean, you can't monitor everything, and now it's so easy. I mean, you used to have to probably go in a back alley and meet somebody, to place a bet. Pete Rose used to, hand something handwritten, to the ball boy who would take it to somebody in the stands, and they'd have to run it then to somebody, else. But now it's so easy to do. Is this a deterrent enough? And where's this going to take us? Because there's another scandal out there waiting to happen. There's no doubt about it. I don't know whether that's going to be Temple or somewhere else, but there is another big scandal out there. And then as fans, once we start to think that what we're seeing is not real or is fixed, then where does that take us? You know what I mean? Because, if I thought a referee, and we've had that unfortunately, in the NBA at least, if I thought a referee or an umpire was throwing a game or something was fixed for the Knicks and the Lakers to be in the finals this year, as much as I'd love to see the Knicks there, I would probably never watch another NBA game. You know what I mean? If it came to me that it was fixed, wrestling, that's different. Most people know that it's for show, and that's okay. Um, Dude, so I don't know. I don't know where this goes. It's scary.
Um,
Yeah.
The other thing too, I believe, I don't know if this is true. I'd have to corroborate it because I just saw it on like social media.
Yeah.
But apparently, since they like the four major sports consider themselves sports leagues, if it was like a giant fix based on gambling and whatnot, it would be like considered like a legal issue too.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
that's why like the WWE is kind of different in that way because I think they're technically an entertainment industry. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. That's very interesting. Very interesting. All right. Let's talk about something more pleasant. The NBA playoffs. What a great time of year this is, right? Kenny, are you surprised with these injuries? All of a sudden, you have Giannis. Looks like he's going to be out for a little bit, at least 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. Jimmy Butler's not playing tonight. Neither is Zion Williamson. And if both those teams happen to move on, I'm not sure that they will now without those two players. And now the Bucks, they had their hands full, I thought, with the Pacers anyway. But now without Giannis for probably that whole series, I mean, so what are you thinking about these three injuries? And obviously, we also still have Julius Randle, who's not going to play, but the Knicks seem to right themselves without him. What do you think about those injuries? And are some teams just an injury away from getting swept in the playoffs and something like that?
Oh, I think a lot of teams are an injury away from being swept in the playoffs. Anthony Davis or LeBron gets hurt, they're not winning another game.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah.
Jokic is banged up and misses a few games. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. What
Yeah.
can Denver do?
And I'm sorry,
Um,
Joel Embiid, I'm sorry, doesn't look healthy to me. If
nah.
you watch that game the other night, he just doesn't look like himself. But go ahead.
Um, well, and I said this last year with the playoffs, like a lot of times it's not necessarily the team that's the best, it's the team that's the healthiest.
Yeah.
Because another one, Jason Tatum, like the 64 win Celtics, are they gonna like what would happen if let's say Jason Tatum missed a series? Could they still get by? I
No.
don't know. You
Yeah.
could you could argue that they don't have another all NBA player on that roster.
Right.
Um, but like it the injuries always kill somebody's season. Um, I think a couple years ago when Giannis got hurt before, like that kind of killed the Bucks season a little bit. Um, I mean, Joel Embiid. We talked a couple of, or was that last week when I mentioned the Rockets and Chris Paul getting hurt?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so injuries seem to always play a big part in who wins and who loses. Um, I don't know. The 76ers still haven't lost a game in a minute. And that scares me as a Knicks fan. But also, the Knicks, I think, out of all the teams that are losing key players, they have shown that they can play well without Julius Randle.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
shade, but no shade, Julius Randle isn't the best playoff player anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, remember the boos he was getting towards the end of the Heat series last year.
Yeah. Yeah. He's not
So
exactly Jimmy Butler in the playoffs.
yeah, but you know who is Jalen Brunson.
Oh
So
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, but I think in general, like injuries are going to kill a lot of these team seasons. Like the Pelicans, we said could be a very scary good team, but not without Zion Williamson healthy, even if he plays. Giannis, like in my mind, I was thinking with the Knicks, okay, you can get to the second round. You could probably beat whoever you face in the first round. I'm still kind of iffy because the Sixers scare me, but I don't know if they can get past Giannis. If Giannis isn't fully healthy, I think they could get past Giannis.
Yeah. Oh
Um,
yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
so yeah, I don't know.
Um. So let's get to the Knicks and Sixers. And first of all, I'm sure you felt this way too. I loved what Thibodeau did on the final day. While the Bucks were tanking it in, while the Cavs sat everybody. I loved that Brunson with 6 minutes left. Thibodeau's like, you're going back in. It's your normal time to go back in. And the Knicks went all out to win that and win the number 2 seed. Um, I think home court for the Knicks these first 2 rounds are very important. But like you said, let's get through this first round first. Listen, this is a tight matchup. The Sixers are a dangerous team. I think them adding Nick Lowry, who also has got his playoff pedigree, and he happens to always kill the Knicks from being with the Heat the last few years. I think the Heat are going to really regret. They're probably regretting it today that they don't have Nick Lowry on that team anymore, especially with Butler out. And I know Lowry's what, 37, 38 years old. That guy could still play.
Yeah.
And he's clutch. He showed that the other night. He hit a big 3-point shot, late in the game the other night. The Sixers are going to be a tough out. I don't think that Embiid is healthy. I think that if this wasn't the playoffs, he wouldn't be playing. With that said, I think that Hartenstein and Robinson and throw in Precious, I think there'll be a lot for him to handle. The Knicks asked a lot of fouls for them to give, with Embiid. And I think the rest of the team, listen, Tyrese Maxey is very good, excellent player, right? Has probably moved at least into the top 15 players in the NBA. But I mean, would you take him over Jalen Brunson? I wouldn't, So I think that matchup is kind of a wash. I think the key is going to be not only with what we said about the centers, but I think if you've got to match Tobias Harris, who also plays big in the playoffs, New York guy. So I think this is where some of the Knicks secondary players really have to step up. Dante DiVincenzo needs to play like he's in the regular season. Josh Hart needs to play like he's in the regular season. If we could get something out of Bogey, that would be great because we're really not getting much scoring from anywhere except Jalen and Dante with Randall out. So I do think that the Knicks will win this series. I think this is I'm stopping short of saying this is a very special team, but it is the type of team that we in New York really love to see. They play hard from start to finish. They're gritty. They're not afraid of anybody. They're the type of team I think the Garden is going to get behind and just be rooting like crazy for. And so I think that home court advantage is going to prove to be big in this series. What do you think?
Um, I don't know if this is exact. No, I don't think this is too exaggerating. Would you say this is the best Knicks team that we've seen since the 90s? Because I kind of feel like it might be.
Yeah, it might be. If Randall was on this team, I wouldn't even hesitate. I'd say absolutely yes. So was it 2013, 2014? Was the Carmelo
Yeah.
54 win team? That was a great team, but you also knew they were still missing a few pieces, because outside of Carmelo, they didn't have another star. You have Randall on this team, you've got two stars, you got two all-stars, and so I would say it's close. I mean, the Knick teams of the 90s, really, it was Patrick Ewing and then a bunch of other guys that were very good. There wasn't really another star on there either. So yeah, I would say it's close.
Yeah, because okay, so we talked about this. You said this from day one. 90 or not 90 wins. 50 wins is kind of the threshold that this team needs to get to. And they got to it on the last day.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I like that they were like, we have a chance to get the 2 seed. Let's go and get the 2 seed. And they did it. It does kind of stink that the bracket fell the wrong way and they end up with the 76ers. Because I feel like if they were to play the Pacers, we feel pretty confident. Play the Heat, especially without Jimmy Butler, you'd feel pretty confident.
Yeah.
But I think that if they can get past the 76ers, you could be looking ahead to, could this team make the Eastern Conference Finals? Could this team possibly upset the Celtics and make it all the way to the NBA Finals? But I think the first thing they've got to protect home court. I agree. This is the type of team that not just Knicks fans, but I think New York has been dying for.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
disappointing Yankees the last few years. We won't talk about the Mets. The Jets and Giants have been awful. The Nets, you had the big three there, and they can't even win more than a playoff series.
Yeah.
This is the type of team where you feel pretty good, and they've won a series last year. So there's already that momentum. I don't know how much we'll get to today, but you look at the Western Conference teams like the OKCs, the Minnesotas, Usually a team like that doesn't make the leap to Western Conference finals/finals. Usually they have to kind of take those steps. We saw it with Sacramento. They made that next step. They made a step last year. So like even if they make the playoffs, like it's all a progression, especially in the NBA. This
Yeah.
Knicks team has the experience. The big light isn't gonna like shrink back for a guy like Jalen Brunson. And with OG and with Brunson healthy, this team has been really, really good. Also, last point, and then I'll kind of give my prediction here. The Knicks were 3-1 against the Sixers this year. Now, 2 of those games Embiid didn't play.
Mm-hmm.
So still 1-1. I think it's going to be a tough, close series. I do think that Embiid's probably going to miss a game, whether it's just his knee is barking or not a hard, dirty foul, but just like a regular playoff foul because, the refs swallow the whistle and whatnot. I think he might miss a game, might miss 2. I'm going to say Knicks in 7.
All right. All right. I'm saying in 6. Let's see if we can get around the NBA playoffs. I think you summed the Knicks series up great. Orlando, Cleveland. What's the feeling like there, and who do you like?
I don't know what's with Cleveland nowadays. Like, no one's really been talking about them. Also, just side note, different sport. The Guardians are tied for the best record in baseball. No one's
Yeah.
talking about it.
Uh,
Um,
I understand. I thought that was a good sports town there, man.
yeah, I mean, I think once the playoffs actually start and we kind of
Yeah.
get games going at the queue, then
Yeah.
because we went to the game Sunday and it was popping like because
Yeah.
the Cavs are also playing in Cleveland, so more on that later. But I do think that the Cavs have something going. I think the biggest thing, like with every team, is health. But I do think they have enough to beat Orlando.
Yeah.
I don't know if they could get past. They would be lining up probably against the Celtics, but
Yeah. 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 Yeah, I like the Cavs in that series. Orlando's on the upswing though, man. I like their young players. They've done a really great job. They really have. Paulo is I mean, we saw him go all the way at Kansas a few years ago, and look at him here in the NBA. Bucks Pacers, which now is kind of swung to be a very, very interesting series. And you've got Halliburton, who is on the rise as one of the top players in the league now. No Giannis. What are you thinking?
I still got to go Bucks. For
Okay.
one reason and one reason alone, Dame Lillard in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Bang.
Yeah. All right. Bang. All right. All right. I'm with you there. I'm with you. So Celtics against either the Bulls or the Heat. I got to tell you, I like the Bulls tonight now without Butler. It's Kobe White. I mean, what when you talk, he's definitely got to win Most Improved Player. Um, he was a bench player the last few years. This guy's unbelievable. The other night, what did he score? 41 points the other night or something like that. I mean,
Yeah.
but he just can jump through the gym. He's fast. He plays great defense. Man, I mean, now listen, they had a losing record. Them and the Hawks got in with losing records, and but I think the Bulls are a little bit better than their record is. I think they've missed Zach LaVine a lot. Even though I know he's not your favorite player, he meant a lot to that team. So who do you like there first tonight? And then do you give any of them a chance against the Celtics?
Yeah, I think Bulls tonight, it's going to be hard to win without Jimmy Butler. I feel like his injury has kind of taken the whatever air that was left in that team out of it. So, but I don't think either of them would stand a chance against the Celtics.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, I can see the Celtics losing a couple of dumb games because that sometimes is the Celtics, but I can't see them losing the series.
Yeah. I think the Celtics are probably rooting for the Bulls, though, man. I do think the Celtics are
Oh,
very
yeah.
leery based on this history with the Heat, Jimmy Butler or no Jimmy Butler, Let's move out west. Zion Williamson, I gotta tell you, Ken, he played like the other night, like everyone expected him to play for these last 4 years that he's been in the league. He was unbelievable, and then he gets hurt. Um, and he's out tonight. Do you give them any chance against a really, really solid and very good Sacramento team?
I don't know. Part of me really wants to see the Pelicans because I do feel like Zion has kind of gotten like a bad rap a little bit. And part of it has been his fault with the
Oh yeah,
injuries and the not taking care of his body and whatnot. But kind of in the same vein of experience. I know they didn't do a lot in the playoffs last year, but Sacramento did make the playoffs last year. So I'm gonna go with them. I think I think they can make an interesting series against OKC, but not really because like the Thunder are still really good.
yeah. Well, so let's go to your subject now. Your topic that you brought up earlier, them in Minnesota, and you have Orlando, I think, in the East. Um, but OKC had the best record in the West. They're the number one seed, but they're still kind of an upstart team. Now they've got a guy that is definitely going to get a lot of MVP votes in Shy, Gildress Alexander. Um, and he's got some great complementary players. He really does. Chet Holmgren has had an excellent year. Even though he's still very thin, he's adapted well to the NBA, I think, NBA game. He was a great college player. Um, if they win around here, do you start to, let's say they take on Sacramento and they beat Sacramento, let's say in 5. Do you see that momentum going that might then take them possibly to the finals?
Maybe the conference finals.
Yeah,
Um, because I guess that they would be playing like either Dallas or the Clippers, right?
the second round. Yeah.
So I don't know if they could beat a Luca. Um, but I don't know. Like I could see them maybe getting to the conference finals, but getting all the way to the NBA finals. Now, granted, I think they are still a really good team. And sometimes you do see these type of one seeds make that leap to the conference finals. Every once in a while, one will break through, but I think it's kind of rare. I don't see them going that far.
Yeah.
But also, fun fact, they are the youngest ever number one seed, if I remember seeing that right.
Yeah, man. They're a tough team. I mean, they're tall, they're long. They've got a deep bench, and a lot of the players on their team. I'm sure you probably do the same thing. I'm like, I know that guy. There's another Jalen, right? I know him. Oh, okay. And I'll look it up real quick. Okay, yeah, he was with Gonzaga. Okay, he was with, and they really drafted well these last few years. All right, let's go to the one that probably first round, even though the other two matchups are really good. Probably all eyes are on this one in the first round. That's the Lakers at Denver. Now, Denver swept them this year too in the regular season. They're 8-0 against Denver in the last eight games. So, I mean, does Denver just have their number? Is this going to be a series? What are your thoughts?
I think it'll be a little bit of a series. I think LeBron still has a couple moments in him, but Denver, I think from like the biggest difference between Denver last year and Denver this year is they finally got it done in the playoffs.
Yeah,
And so that's not going to stop them moving forward.
yeah,
I got Denver there. Denver
yeah.
in like 6.
Okay. All right. I mean, the Lakers are playing well, but I don't see a scenario of them actually beating Denver. I don't think Denver's going to sweep them this time around, but I'm with you. Um Phoenix at Minnesota. Wow, what an interesting matchup this is.
This one to me is the hardest one to call. And I could be 100% wrong in here, but I feel like maybe Phoenix will click it all together. Um, Kevin Durant's still a really good player. I feel like he's one of the most overlooked players this year. Um, I mean, their record was okay compared to like what people thought they would do.
Oh yeah.
Devin Booker is still there.
Yeah.
So I can see them kind of making a little bit of a run. I don't think they can make it past the second round necessarily, but I do think that they can beat the Timberwolves.
Okay. And Bradley Beal is healthy. They've played well the last like 10 games or so. Now Minnesota, Karl Anthony Towns is playing, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. I think that makes a difference there. So I am going to go with Minnesota, but I think that'll be a 7-game series. I really do. Um, and does it get more interesting than the Kyrie and Luka Dallas Mavericks against this all-star team that is the Clippers and playoff P? Uh, Paul George out there. I mean, I mean, what are you thinking there? I mean, the Clippers had a great, not a good, they had a great regular season after a terrible start. I really, really admire what they did. And you know, they're easy to root against, but I'm not rooting against them. I like what I saw, you know, from even James Harden, you know, and Russell Westbrook, perfect role player off the bench now. What are you thinking on that series?
Okay, I'd said Phoenix and Minnesota is the hardest. This to me is the second hardest. But I think I'm still leaning towards Luka and the Mavs. Um, really since Kyrie's been healthy and has kept his head on straight. That's I think the key there. They've been really good. At one point, you weren't sure if they were even going to make the playing game, and here they were. They leaped up to the fifth seed. Um, Luka's probably going to finish top 3 MVP. I mean, we're still a little ways away from like actually talking about this, but probably looking at Jokic 1, SGA, Luka 2, 3, kind of something like that. So I
Yeah.
do think that he's had a really good season. I thought I saw the average 35 points a game. And he's also like, he's had his playoff moments, but I don't think he's ever had one of those where he's kind of taken over
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Because even when the Mavs got all the way to the Western Conference Finals, there was this dude named Jalen Brunson that was kind of running the show there, kind of
Yeah.
taking the spotlight. But
Yeah.
I think them two can really make a difference. I think the biggest thing is going to be what are you going to get from James Harden? Because James Harden at times has looked really good, but in the playoffs, James Harden also has looked awful.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think that's going to be one of the biggest keys, what they can do with Harden.
It's going to be some great series, man. And most of them we're probably not going to see because a lot of these are going to start at 10 o'clock or 10:30 here, 30 here, you know, but I I have to say I think the Clippers will win that series, but I really, not that I'm crazy about Dallas. I just have always thought Kyrie, if he had his head on straight, was one of the most unique talents ever in the NBA. And those two guys together, I could see them making a deep run this year. But I think the Clippers, if they stay healthy through the series, which they have surprisingly all year with you know, with Leonard, with Kawhi rather, Kawhi Leonard, um, and Georgia stayed pretty healthy all year. It's going to be hard to beat the Clippers. I could see the Clippers getting to the conference finals at least this year. So this is going to be fun, man. I mean, it's, you know, this is going to be. I mean, the NBA, they've had a great year, and now hopefully there's no controversy and they could just have a great playoff. This is going to be, you know, it's not like baseball, basketball every year where there's a surprise team, but I have a feeling this year there's going to be a surprise team or two. And even though they're the number 1 seed, I think people would be surprised if OKC wound up in the finals. You know, I think that'll surprise a lot of people. So, um, hey, let's jump over to baseball for a few minutes and do a skip around the league here. Your Yankees still playing extremely well. Give us your take. What do you like that you're seeing, and what do you like? What would you like to see them improve on at this point?
Well, let's start with what I like. I like the bottom of this order. Also, I like Volpe hitting top, but um the combination of like Verdugo, Oswaldo Cabrera, and also I'll put in Volpe there too. They have done a tremendous job to me. I don't know if you actually fully answered it or not, but there are two guys in the last 3 years that have under 100 strikeouts each year. Alex Verdugo and Jose Ramirez. Like,
Oh, wow.
that's
That's
the
right. I didn't
list.
answer that. Yeah. Yeah. I forgot to answer
Um,
that. I wouldn't have known it though. That's great.
yeah, but like and also like seeing them in person, like Juan Soto is a lot of fun to watch in person. Um, but like the lineup I think has been really good. The pitching, it's been okay. Like they lost their first series. It is what it is. It's baseball. Um, but I think my biggest concern moving forward is I don't know if Aaron Judge is fully healthy. Um, I'll pull up his numbers. They have not been that they haven't been very Judge-like. Now he hit a massive home run on Sunday, and then also had a huge game yesterday. No, not yesterday, Wednesday, kind of sparking the comeback. But overall on the season, here we go. He's batting 183
Mhm.
with 3 home runs and 11 RBIs and a 710 OPS. Like just to kind of put it in perspective, uh his on base is 330, which is still pretty good. But his slugging is 380. I'm just worried because he had missed some time in spring and they called it a core issue. They didn't use the word oblique, but it always concerns me with something in your core and in your midsection.
Yeah, especially a
Because
big
like
guy
it,
like that. Yeah.
yeah, and it takes like it's not like it's something that goes away right away. Like you talk to like if you listen to interviews and such and talk to baseball players, they all say it's something that lingers for months. And if that's the case, that kind of concerns me. Um, the bullpen also, I feel like they probably need another arm, but I'm probably looking more at the deadline for actually getting that type of help. And there are some guys that are coming back. Tommy Kahnle is going to be coming back shortly. You're going to get Lou Trevino in mid-season as well as Scott Efros. So bullpen might be fine, but it does kind of seem like if Ian Hamilton's not available, you're kind of crossing your fingers to get to Clay Holmes. So
Yeah.
there's that.
Yeah.
Also, this is, well, it is related to the Yankees. I didn't put it on the agenda, and bad on me for doing it. We got to talk some John Sterling. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah. Go ahead. Okay. We have
So
time.
tomorrow, officially, they're gonna honor him, and he's gonna get his well-deserved flowers. Um, and there's a few like I could talk a while about it, but I'll keep it short. Um, I want to give these stats because they're crazy. A storied franchise like the Yankees, they've been around since 1903. John Sterling has called just under 30% of all regular season games.
Amazing.
The
Wow.
28-time World Series champ, or sorry, talking in the future, the 27-time World Series champion Yankees. Um, he's called 49.5% of their postseason games. Now I
Wow.
know that's a little skewed because like World Series versus like now 3 rounds, but still 49%. And Derek Jeter, like obviously one of the iconic figures in Yankee history, he called 100% of Derek Jeter's at bats on the radio.
Wow.
Um, we talked a few weeks ago about how he was on the radio call for Hank Aaron's 715. But like every single iconic Yankee moment in my lifetime has a John Sterling call to it. And that's something that you can't say about a lot of guys. He
Yeah.
literally started calling games the year before I was born.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
which is crazy to
89.
think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and like I think of all of the different calls of like I've seen it a few times when they first won in 96. A lot of like the big iconic home runs throughout the years, like he was on that. And talk about like a model of consistency. He was just there every single time.
Yeah.
And like I know sometimes people don't like his calls, but I do. Like after Juan Soto hit his first home run, I made sure to flip to the radio so I could hear what his call for Juan Soto was.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we got one before he retired. Um, so I think like, and I love also one of the things that I saw a few different times, minor league teams, a couple of other major league broadcasts did his home run call to kind of pay homage to him. So it's really cool to see. I really I'm definitely gonna miss hearing him on the radio. And one of the first things that came to mind for me was sitting in my bed when I'm 7, 8 years old, falling asleep to John Sterling and Michael Kay on the radio.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
good for John Sterling.
Fitting tribute. I like Sterling a lot. I love when I love the broadcasters that'll be a little creative, and a lot of people don't like that, like Kevin Harlan. They'll say, he screams too much or whatever. But I mean, he's excited, he's a fan as well. And I always felt that way with Sterling. He was so creative. I always wondered, did he do all of these himself? These calls himself. Or did he get somebody to write these for him? Yeah, he's gonna be missed this summer, I think. warm July night, you have the radio on and you don't hear him calling a Yankee game. He's definitely going to be missed. Another really icon. And I go back to hearing him do New York, not even New Jersey net games back in the late 70s and early 80s. And then he was the voice of the Islanders when they won their championships. I know our friend Larry hates that, but he called the Islander games for a long time too. So he's had a long career. And I remember him having sports talk shows before FAN on WMCA, taking calls and stuff like that. So Sterling's been around, man. And I think he found his home with the Yankees for sure. He became synonymous with the Yankees. So yeah, he's definitely going to be missed. Listen, I'll say real quick with the Mets. We'll jump around the league. This is a big series this week. I love the way they played this past week. Um, they obviously they get the Dodgers, and the next two games are day games too. It's 4 o'clock tomorrow, 4 o'clock Sunday. Um, but tonight is at 10:10, and tonight is Yamamoto pitching, and I would love to see them go against Yamamoto, but I don't think I'm gonna make it. Till probably make it till 11 tonight, so I'll see a little bit of it. The Mets pitching has been outstanding. Their starters. It's been a blessing and a curse. The starters have been so good, but they're not getting past they're only pitching 5, 6 innings most. I don't think any of their starters have gone to the seventh inning yet. Thus, it's taxing on the bullpen, but the bullpen has been great. And so, and Edwin Diaz looks like Edwin Diaz last year. He did give up a home run the other day, but, it only, they were up by 2 runs. So he gave up a solo home run. It was that Sunday against Kansas City. The Mets cooled off a couple of hot teams. They cooled off the Royals and they cooled off the Pirates. So, I'll take that. I like what I'm seeing with their hitting. Their guys are coming around. You said this. Don't worry about Lindor. Don't worry about McNeil. These guys will hit, and they're starting to hit. So I like what I see from the Mets. I'm not sure why, but the stadium is like half empty every game. Like Dwight Gooden's retirement thing, I thought that would have been a full stadium, but it was barely half empty, half full. So they're not drawing the crowds yet. It's still cold here, especially at nighttime. So, and I think people are a little skeptic, right? They're like, especially after they started 0-5, 0-6, whatever it was. I think they're a little skeptical. They didn't spend the money. It's not going to be a good team. But I said I thought it would be a contending team. I would still feel more comfortable with one more pitcher, but I got to tell you, man, these guys have been good. Severino has been good. Sean Manaea wasn't good in his last start, but he was excellent his first two. Hauser's been okay. Good enough. Jose Butto has come up. Julio Teheran got cut after one start. And Quintana has been really good. So I like where the Mets are at right now. A couple of quick notes I have here around baseball, and I know you have a Trevor Bauer update. The Braves, man, I haven't talked to Mike Clark, our big Braves fan down there, but without Spencer Strider now for the year, and Ozzie Albies, did you see that? He's out for at least a month. And he's
Oh,
a huge part of that team. And so I think the Braves will be hurting, but I mean they're so deep. I think they're going to be fine. The Dodgers, I think you're seeing that without pitching, they've got great hitting, got stars, but they got an all-star crew that's on the disabled list, for their pitching. But oh my gosh, the Rockies, the Marlins, the Astros. As I said, the Astros, stop crying, uh, and the White Sox have been god awful so far. And I have to say, aside from the Rockies, I'm surprised at those other teams. And I think the Astros will straighten themselves out. But I mean,
no.
Abreu's getting booed like crazy there. And, he hasn't done anything. Actually, last year he didn't have a very good year either. Um, but the White Sox 3-15. And I mean, the Rockies I didn't expect to be good. I expected the Marlins to contend this year, even though I know they lost a couple of good players, but anyway, those are my notes on around the horn in baseball. You had any comments on the Astros? 6-14.
Um, yeah, no, the Astros have a worse record than the A's, which I'll keep saying that until it's not true. Um, The Astros are going to be in a spot very similar to the Golden State Warriors right now. Like
Yeah, that's a good
you
comparison.
have you have a star player that's signed past this year, but what else are you going to do? Are you going to hold on to some of your other pieces and try to build
Yeah.
around them? Or are you just going to say, let's tear it down and try again? Please do the latter, because I don't want to have to deal with the Astros. Um, the White Sox, I'd sent you that stat that UConn has won
Yes.
more basketball games since opening day than the White Sox have won baseball games all year. Um, it is interesting because like last year, the only really, really bad division was the AL Central. And right now, the AL Central is kind of balanced. They have the team with the best record, the Guardians. They have two other teams over 500 and then two teams below. But listen to the AL West records. You got Texas, who's 11-9 as defending champs, and then Seattle 9-10, the Angels 9-10, Oakland 8-11. I don't know if we can still call them Oakland. Houston 6-14. Like that's everyone else is below 500.
Yeah.
Um, the Red Sox are in last place in the East at 10-10. They would be in second place a game back. But also the NL West, we thought it would be a juggernaut. You have the 12-9 Dodgers leading it, and then the Padres at 11-10. Everybody else is below 500.
Yeah.
And I guess part of it is just the nature of how, like a lot of that stuff will even out because there hasn't been a ton of in-division games, which is different from years past when like in April, basically you're playing your division because you got to play them 19 times. But
Yeah.
it's just really interesting to kind of see how teams have kind of gotten off to that type of whether fast or slow start. I think the
Yeah.
Red Sox is one that sticks out to me as a team that I thought they were going to be awful, but they've been actually pretty decent.
Hanging in there. Yeah. Um, I'm surprised more the Diamondbacks too haven't gotten off to a better start. Blake Snell has pitched awful in his first couple of starts, and so it just goes to show, baseball. You and I were moaning about spring training is a little long, but we're seeing like JD Martinez. We have no idea when we're going to see him. Um, and I don't think Jordan Montgomery has he pitched a game yet? I'm not sure. I don't think so.
I feel
Um,
like he's close, but let me
yeah.
check.
They need that spring training. Some of these guys that signed late, it's definitely not serving them well. But I think a lot of these teams, like you said, it'll even out. I expect the Diamondbacks, the Giants, those teams to be good. I don't expect the Red Sox. I think they'll be about a 500 team, you know. But I think that it'll be the rest of that division. I'm glad the Yankees are off to a good start. They really need to be in that division.
Yeah,
Um,
Montgomery has not made his start, but he's expected to soon against the Giants.
yeah, and we're coming up on the end of April next week, so yeah, it takes about a month, right? They need about that month of warm up. All right, you ready for some inspiration?
Yeah, do you want the quick Trevor Bauer
Oh,
thing
I'm sorry.
first?
Yeah, yeah, please go ahead.
Um,
It doesn't have to be that quick. We're good.
so Instagram, Trevor Bauer, well, I guess on all of his social platforms. So I still follow him. He gave to the Learning Center,
Yep.
so I'm not gonna not follow him. But supposedly one of the people that um accused him of sexual assault is now facing felony fraud charges, not against him, but against another
Thought I
man.
saw that. Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so he kind of goes on and kind of tells a little bit more of his story regarding, because this isn't the main one that we've seen, like the pictures and whatnot. This is somebody else, but apparently now she is facing felony fraud charges. So, and he kind of gives details back and forth of how this encounter happened and how she says it happened, but it didn't happen that way. I don't know. The more and more evidence, because so there was 4 girls overall that accused him of wrongdoing. One he's been exonerated from. The other is facing felony charges. 2 are still pending. At what point are people going to be like, okay, maybe he was just kind of the wrong place at the wrong time? I don't know. But also still no one's advocating for him. I was thinking about this earlier. Like he said that like he's contacted a few teams. Have you seen that from, say, a John Heyman, a Ken Rosenthal? I was gonna say
Nope.
Brian Hoke, but he's more Yankee. Like, we haven't really seen that. And so I wonder, because this happens with agents sometimes, if that was more the agent just kind of called and said, "Oh, we've contacted the Yankees or we've contacted the Dodgers or like whoever." But like no one's really even bid at him. And how many teams could use a starting pitcher right now? Especially one that is game ready. Like he played against the Yankees in Mexico. I think he also played against the Dodgers out in Korea or whatever. So
Yeah.
like he's
Yeah.
game ready, but I don't know.
Can you think about this now? And I saw some of that, what you were talking about, the lady that is being charged with fraud and other stuff. I mean, it just is so apparent that, at least apparent to me, based on more of her history, that she was lying about him too. Because they have her dead to right on some stuff. She's actually involved in some pretty serious fraud stuff, if I remember right. Um, you've got the Mets, you've got the Yankees, you've got the Dodgers, who could have used a arm like his. Yeah, Garrett Cole out, Senga. We still don't know when he's coming back. How many guys do the Dodgers have on the DL? You know, from Kershaw to a few others. Uh, They couldn't use him. I mean,
The Astros.
the Astros. I mean, at this point, I would be. I won't speak for you. I would be stunned if he got an opportunity at this point in the season, because yeah, something can happen in July, another bad injury to a contending team and someone scoop him up, but I don't think anybody has any intentions of signing him. I hate to use this word, but I think he's been blackballed. I think,
Yeah.
and listen, part of it is his own doing, right? He didn't endear himself, no matter what he says about, hey, I'm a good teammate, good teammate. He wasn't a good teammate for a while to a lot of, at least to the teams that he was on. And baseball is sort of like, a high school where gossip goes around, and because these players change teams so much. So teammate of his with the Guardians, may have been on 4 or 5 more teams since then, right? And yeah, Bauer, no, man, remember how he was. But it just goes to show how, Christ always changes us, but yet in the flesh, we always still may have that reputation of how we were 4 or 5 years ago when we could be a total new person. And I'm not saying he's a total new person. Um, I think he's learned his lesson a lot, and I think he would go out of his way to be a great teammate, if he got another shot. But like you said, the advocating for him, nobody's doing that. Probably you and I are the only ones that have said. Maybe there's been other podcasts that are saying, "Hey, we should give him a shot," But dude, and it's. I mean, he's still throwing 99 miles an hour. I didn't think he threw 99 when he was won the Cy Young. I didn't.
No.
So I mean, he's pitching better now than he was before. I mean, and it was against major league hitters a couple of times, not just once. So I don't know. I think unfortunately we've seen the last of him in the major leagues.
Yeah, and you'd said 99. He is like, and you could tell when you've heard interviews with him too. He is like kind of an analytics nerd where he wants to learn how to do what he does better. And he's done a good job of that. Like he used that to win the Cy Young.
Yeah.
And yet
Yeah.
now here he is. And yeah, I would be surprised. Like if
It's a
we
sad
get a
story.
breaking news, like that would be like, let's pull out the cameras and do a quick podcast episode.
I know. I never thought I would root for him to get another shot, but honestly, I, I listen. The stuff that he did. Are you and I into stuff like that? Of course not. Most people aren't, but it's not illegal either. You know what I mean? And so I do think though at this point he's like blackball, and it makes you wonder why some of these other guys that had domestic abuse and stuff like that are still playing. You know, they suspended Aroldis Chapman for 2 games the other day. I didn't see what he did. That was so he must have said something horrible to the umpire because he got kicked out pretty fast. But he didn't go and push him or anything like that. But he got suspended for 2 games. What he probably said was awful. But Chapman pitched again after he had after he had something where didn't a gun go off? I mean, it was like, I
Yeah,
mean,
he fired a gun in an altercation,
yeah, I mean,
like a whole clip, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah, and nobody mentions that. So I see where he has a point, So all right, I'll be quick. Jack Twyman, Maurice Stokes. I'm gonna sum the story up a little bit. I totally forgotten about this. Maurice Stokes was a great player first couple of years in the league in the NBA. Now this goes back to the 50s, and this it's significant because in the 50s there was no pension, there was no health benefits for NBA players. And so freakish injury on the last game of the season in 1958, where Stokes falls down and he hits his head and he actually finishes playing the game. It's his last game of the season, but he had post-traumatic encephalopathy, which was a brain injury, after he hit his head in a fall. So then he became paralyzed and he couldn't speak. He barely could do anything. Now Maurice Stokes is black, was black. Um, and Jack Twyman, who was a very good NBA player, was white. And what started happening was that once Stokes got hurt, he had only made $9,000 in his first 3 years in the NBA. And so he didn't really have money for his care. And Twyman, what he started doing, he started putting together a benefit all-star game. And there were only 90 players in the league back then, and 65 of them would show up every year to raise money. And at first, Stokes stayed in a facility, and Twyman would take players to go see him every day. And Twyman totally took care of all of his medical expenses. But then
Wow.
when it got to be a little bit too much, Twyman took him into his house and became his primary caregiver. And he would always bring players over to see him, Wilt Chamberlain or any of the big players back then, Oscar Robertson, Bill Russell. They all knew Maurice Stokes. And Maurice Stokes died of a heart attack in 1970. And he was only 36 years old. But their friendship was just unbelievable. There's talk that Spike Lee is now going to go back and make a movie of the two of them. And but I think even the time, Kenny, of the black and white friendship like that, back in the 50s and 60s makes the story even more amazing that Twyman did what he did. Now, Twyman passed away. He's a Hall of Famer. He passed away a few years ago. But I think I was saying this to you, or maybe I was saying it on the podcast. I knew him as a broadcaster on ABC. Like I wouldn't remember him as a player at all. But when I first started watching basketball, he was one of the main analysts for ABC. And if I remember right, he did a pretty good job. But the only way I remember this story now, because I remember hearing about it before, is that I didn't realize the NBA has a Jack Twyman Award. I think they call it the Twyman Stokes Award every year. They give to someone who has given back to the community and has done really good works. And Jalen Brunson is nominated for it this year. I'm not sure when they announced that, because to be honest, I hadn't really heard of that award before. But apparently it goes to someone who's gone above and beyond. Jack Twyman, there's nothing in the article that I found about God, about Christ-like. There's no way anybody could convince me, man, that he didn't have God in his life for him to take care of that guy like that. A man that was his teammate, but he didn't know all that greatly, but his heart he knew that this guy needed help, and he took care of him for the rest of his life. So Jack Twyman, Maurice Stokes, inspiration today.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I have very quick two things. First, Jack Leiter made his major league debut, the son of
Yes.
Al Leiter, second overall prospect in baseball, or with the Rangers, whatever. But what makes that interesting is Al Leiter and his brother Mark Leiter both now have sons that have played in Major League Baseball. First
Oh, really?
time
Okay, I didn't
brothers
know
have
that.
had both of their sons play.
Wow.
But my second one is kind of along those lines. I mentioned it a couple times, but kind of inspiration, keeping the family line. and this is in a couple ways. So Isaac and I went to the Guardians-Yankees game this past Sunday. I will say one of the craziest games that I've been to in person, just as far as gameplay goes. The Yankees lost, and it's awful in the way that they lost. But Isaac is definitely becoming a Guardians fan. He's hardcore cheering for them. But I'd sent you the picture. His excitement when they won was like one of the funnest things that I've seen this year for sports.
Yeah. Wow.
And I'm like, because like I'm sitting there like, oh my gosh, the Yankees are gonna blow this. Like you could just kind of tell their defense. That's another red flag. Their defense has been awful.
Yeah.
But Gleyber Torres fumbles it a little bit, which then causes the tying run to score. I'm like, well, this is over. Runner on third, less than 2 outs. But I think that might be the first walk-off win I've been to, at least in Cleveland.
Yeah.
And they hit the sac fly, they go crazy, and Isaac is over the moon happy. So keeping the family line, I don't follow the team that you follow. My son doesn't follow the team that I follow. So
yeah.
But it is fun, like, and it does make me want to go to another game with him. We're also talking about going to another Akron Rubber Ducks game.
Okay.
A lot of fun there. So yeah.
I'm just so amazed. That's great. But I'm so amazed that he sits still, because even at his age now, where he's getting a little older, he's gonna be 5. He's still so hyper with a ton of energy. I'm really still surprised he sits still and watches the game, but maybe he's just amazed by it.
Yeah, we did have to walk around a few times.
Okay. Yeah.
Like we went up to get food at one point. We went down to the team shop, which was closed for whatever reason. So
yeah. That's awesome. I think I'll just say this real quick and then we can wrap up. Was it the Reds and the Phillies when we went to go see a game in Philadelphia and it went 19 innings? And,
yeah.
Ryan Howard hit a home run in the 9th inning to tie it. And we're like, okay, this is good. And then it goes, and it seems like every time the Reds scored, the Phillies scored. And that happened at least 2 or 3 times. And I think we had to leave by like the 15th inning. We're like, because it was like already like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, 2:30, and we didn't have a hotel that night. We had to come back,
Yeah, and we had church. I think both of us had obligations too.
We had obligations at church that next day, so we had to come back. Yeah, we didn't get much sleep. But that was a great game, even though the Yankees lost. But that was a great game. All right, good stuff, man. Lots to talk about next week. We gotta sprinkle in some hockey next week by request, so we will do that as the NHL playoffs get cranking up also. But for now, take us home.
This is Kenny Squared N.
Kenny?
With Sport. We'll see you guys next week.
Absolutely.